Hello and welcome to Split Your Head. I'm your host, Bob, and today's guest is Seth Troyer, an Ohio based filmmaker and podcaster whose recent short film Vertigo 2 put my head into a sequel drenched tailspin. And an amalgamation of meta antics and fourth wall shattering detours, Seth's film posits the almighty question: what is a sequel? Seth also co hosts Unwatchables, a film podcast dedicated to dissecting some of the most disturbing or alienating or insert hyperbolic descriptor here flicks in existence. Clearly, his brain is brimming with bold ideas. And as a friend of the show, I had to have him on to discuss Vertigo 2 and what the heck is up with sequels. Seth, how are you doing?
What the heck?
What the
I'm
heck?
good.
Yeah.
That's a good way of describing Unwatchables. I feel like it's always, you always got to list all the caveats of like what constitutes Unwatchables as much as you can, and those are good. Those are good ones. I feel like insert hyperbolic thing here is what I need to just throw in there. It'll save a lot of breath for me because there's so often where I bring up the thesis of the podcast, and unless I am covering all my bases, they're like, well, that one's not really like, you could technically watch it, or like, I don't know, that one's not that scary, that one's not that disturbing. It's just like, I don't know, it does a bunch of things. There's a bunch of avenues, and come on the show and bring your reason.
It's true. It's always something sensational to some degree, sensationally disturbing, or sensationally terrible, or sensationally controversial. Just so many different things. And I wonder if by doing this show, because like when you started Vertigo 2, you had already been doing Unwatchables at this point. Is that right?
I don't know. No.
Oh,
this
okay.
was the whole thing is I started filming it when I lived in Columbus, Ohio, with my partner at the time, and it was like 2020 when I started filming it.
Oh, okay.
So it was during the pandemic, and I was living with my partner and all these PhD students, like aspiring PhD students, in this weird house. And my partner was one of them. So I was just like constantly walking down the hallway and learning some random weird thing about, I don't know, an assumption that I thought I had about life or morals. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's faulty logic. I guess I got to rethink that whole thing now. And then go forth and go make breakfast or whatever. It was kind of a lot. It definitely made me feel a little stupid, but also I was sort of the kooky artist down the hall that they sort of didn't have. I always thought we kind of had a push and pull of that was fun. It was like they were very intellectual, and I was more on the side of like spontaneity and the weirdness of like art and stuff. And we kind of merged there. And part of it was that we bonded over Hitchcock. We are all like, we had this like Hitchcock marathon, and we got to Vertigo, and we all just like were knocked out by Vertigo. I had seen it already, but we were all just like having a great time with it and just adored it. And that was when we made the joke, like, what if there was a sequel to Vertigo? Like, what would just in this way that movies, they are like, sequels are silly in this way, especially, and they seem to announce themselves as silly in Hollywood in such a big way, because it is so often like, even my mom knows that certain sequels are made as money grabs, and they aren't actually like, there was definitely a need for this, and surely this must have happened,
right.
And this is about the story continuing. No, it's like keeping jobs, like, and all that stuff. But that was the genesis of that.
So you're in this environment around PhD students, doctors, scientists, whatever. I'm not really sure what everyone's dabbling
little
in
baby ones. They're aspiring.
Little baby geniuses.
Yeah.
Yes. So you're and so it seems like it's getting your mind to a place of well, what do I bring to the table in this conversation, which is art, right? And the spontaneity of art. You know, you're always kind of positioning yourself in these conversations as, well, art actually doesn't operate in the most scientific terms. Art doesn't always validate these hypotheses, or whatever the plural is of that word. And so in a way, you're having these conversations, and it's leading you to then say, well, okay, what if I try to approach the making of this short film, Vertigo 2, as if I have a hypothesis, or it's like art's form of trying to have a hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, that makes it sound good, but I don't think that was really going on in my head. Like, it was sort of just, it was an inside joke, which I like. I like that in movies, and sometimes it's alienating. Like, we just did Forbidden Zone on our podcast, which is like the Oingo Boingo movie, which definitely feels like that, or like John Waters movies sometimes, like the most primitive John Waters movies, or George Kuchar. They kind of feel like they're just friends getting together making something. Yeah. And they're in on it, and they just happen to like, what if we turn the camera on, and like, you got in that outfit, and we got this going on, and you're her brother now, or something. And I'm just describing basically what kids do in a basement when they're left to their own devices, minus the camera. You know, they just like have fun, they play. Which I've always felt that way about films that I make, because I've been making movies since I was a kid like that, and that's where this kind of started. Like, and I always just, even through going to video classes and learning about film in college and stuff, I just always wanted to retain that level with my movies, mainly because I wasn't about to kind of kid myself about what was going on, which is, yes, okay, I'm more mature, I've seen some highbrow movies or something, but I still just got this silly little mini DV camera, and I am still just running around in the backyard and making this thing that's going to wind up on YouTube. Not in a defeatist way, but it is this, like, first and foremost, it's my relationship to those friends and an experience that we're having together. Which again wasn't kind of inspired by John Waters or something like that. It's like this band, like we're a band together, and this was a thing to do together, to bring each other, to have an excuse to like meet up that wasn't just like going to the bar or something.
But it seems like then, because you're kind of making these allusions to like how you're sort of playing dress up, more or less. Like, you're even the idea of like you playing dress up as a filmmaker, and how to you filming it with this mini DV cam, there's something almost like non-committal about it, which in a way feels like part of the spirit of these more absurd sequels that we're talking about, is that it has this serious idea, and then of the first film is the serious idea, and then the sequel is the ridiculous jumping off point. It's the ridiculous like make believe dress up play of that first film, which is perfectly what Vertigo 2 is in a way. But then inside Vertigo 2 is the sequel attacking and eating itself too.
There is.
I don't know if I'm like thinking. Yeah, I feel like I think you're like, I just tried to have fun with my friends, and I'm like, no, it's scientific, it's theoretical, it's.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to find a way of beginning that, because there's the thread that is more pretentious in my head always, and the thread that is just, we're just having a fuck off fun time, you know, because there is always the element, like, I love, again, really highbrow, weird stuff.
Yeah.
Like symbiocytotoxoplasm is this.
Yeah.
It's this crazy meta documentary. We don't need to get into all the layers of it and stuff, but they're playing with layers of the fourth wall, and like how the director, the filming the film within a film, all this stuff, which again can get really pretentious and shit. But I like and was inspired by a lot of that with my filmmaking techniques of of that, where I just, and I mean it again as this sort of childlike wackiness of every time I do it, I kind of feel like we might find the rabbit hole to Wonderland or something. Like we actually
Mm,
are going through the fourth wall. We might not get out. We not get back. Just like this play acting we're doing or something. And it's a little voice in my head. It's not like actually like I have this convoluted woo woo idea about any of it, but
mm,
it is like getting into a state. I'm interested in that, like method acting or
right.
whatever it is. Yeah, and part of that is left in the movie, which you can see that I leave some of my own direction in. Like
Right. Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
the camera wobble around, and I've done that ever since I was in high school for some of my movies. Uh,
Mm,
just first it was like an accident, and then I kind of loved it because it just reiterated what was actually going on, which is the absurdity of making a movie. Whether you're me or Steven Spielberg, like I wish there was a cut of like Jurassic Park with just a couple lines where you hear Steven Spielberg giving direction here and there or something,
yeah.
or you hear his voice behind the camera, and not in some, again, not in some sort of like pretentious let's be really out there or something, in a way that just reiterates this weird thing that movies are, which are this, like, it's a bunch of adults pretending, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like a weird ritual. It's a, you know, it
Hmm.
feels vaguely mystical in some sort of weird way. Uh
Um, Two things to what
huh.
you all just said there. One, you're kind of making me think of a conversation I had with a friend of mine, who's a musician, about the whole idea of like the definition of pretentious and how, in a way, the definition of pretentious is being trying to be something you're not. And I think as an artist, you kind of need to do that in order to grow and to try new ideas. So, in a way, being pretentious is almost like you're sort of failing a little bit at what you're trying to do because you haven't fully convinced people that you are that thing, but you need to do that. You need to
Mm-hmm.
overreach, because you do end up landing somewhere in between all of that. The other thing is, I really like the idea of like adding in the direction thrown in there. I think though it's maybe a bit of a missed opportunity where the direction thrown in is sort of like adding a layer of like behind the scenes, but you could also look at that as an opportunity to construct those scenes as well. Do you know what I mean? Like always making every aspect of it 100% fictional, which would then solidify like this whole world. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I never thought about that. That would be interesting, because it always has been this decision after the fact of, I'm not cognizant of my direction being left in the movie later.
Right,
It's always this sort of like, no, nah, I'm not going to do that again, and then I wind up doing it again, and I leave it in the
right.
editing or something. But that would be
But
interesting, like creating
yeah,
fictional layers behind it, and actually like who is filming this and all that. And
right, yeah,
uh,
yeah. Just looking at it like that. And the thing is, you could, if you're willing, or I shouldn't say willing, but if you're interested in doing this, is when you're editing the film and adding those scenes in, you could even then say, oh, well, then I can just go back and continue that as like a new strand or something. It's like any of these possibilities in there. But I think that one of the reasons why you leave them in there is probably linked to you being a musician and how it has like a sort of textural quality in it, in the same way that someone might leave like a little mistake because it adds
mm-hmm.
more of an expressive quality to the film, in the way that the mistake in a song might add an expressive quality to the music. I mean, the most famous example of that is Creep by Radiohead, which Johnny Greenwood doing that chun 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 part is
Yeah.
supposedly he wanted to destroy the song, so he threw that mistake in there. And I feel like when people leave mistakes like that in there, it's this weird way of like adding something to make it more human, and in turn, it usually ends up making it stand out more.
Yeah, the humanness is really what I'm going for with a lot of that, which
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm wanting to, and not just for my own art, but in this conversation of this, like why it's Vertigo 2, which again, like going back to that, it's a silly thing. It's a silly idea that
Yeah.
me in Columbus, Ohio, I'm not actually commissioned by the Hitchcock estate to, we need to make the Vertigo 2. I am just suddenly deciding to make Vertigo 2. But I
Yeah.
like that about it. I want other people to do, I love it when people do things like that, or just because if
Mm-hmm.
anything, there's still like ideas that you're not allowed to or something. Like just go forth and do these
Yeah.
things. And I don't know. I like that about it. It kind of feels like a punk band suddenly being like, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
cover all of Topographic Oceans by Yes, or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though it's just like a ridiculous idea, and winds up being this sort of, yeah, I don't know, bringing Hitchcock down to earth because he is seen as this megalithic character. And I think
Yeah.
that's what weird sequels for me do in general, which
Mm.
like, and to a fault sometimes, for quite often for the
Mm-hmm.
sequels, because they are just in the shadow, but they do emphasize sort of the, like, what is this, like, I was watching last night, I was watching S Darko, the sequel
Okay.
to Donnie
Right.
Darko, like much hated Donnie Darko sequel that Richard Kelly, the director of Donnie Darko, wants nothing to do with, and is like, if anything, like, seems
Right.
to go out of his way to be really offended about, when anything is just like,
Yeah.
it's obviously some kids being, I don't know, at best it's some kids having fun with fan fiction. At worst, it's definitely a
Mm.
cash grab. Uh, but S Darko, if anything, just emphasizes the weirdness of Donnie Darko in general, and like, what even is it once you like stretch it further into a sequel, or
Right.
like, which it is, like, it's a psychological teen movie with magic, but nobody really understands what the magic is. And then once you stretch
Yeah.
it into a sequel, you're like even more confused as to what is the actual Donnie Darko ness that makes it Donnie Darko. And that continues into, we were going to talk about Birds 2,
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
Hitchcock sequel that a lot of people don't know exists, but it definitely points to, like, kind of just makes it a horror movie, right? It's just a regular horror movie,
Mm.
but it makes you wonder how different it is from the original Hitchcock, or if maybe even there is some sort of, like, just because it has Hitchcock's name on it, is it all that? Obviously, this is made by a pretty incompetent filmmaker by comparison, but like, you
Well,
wonder what
I
is the disparagement,
I watched Birds 2 last night in preparation of this. I don't know if I've actually seen the first Birds, but I mean, I think most of
Oh, cool,
Hitchcock's
we both can say
films.
that. I have not
Oh,
seen
okay,
all of
okay.
Birds.
But I feel like we know it almost like we've absorbed it through culture. You know, we understand the story, the whole impact of it. So I kind of understood what Birds 2 was trying to do. And it's funny because I didn't even think it was that bad. And that was also part of my issue with it. Like, it really just had no character to it. And it had
Uh-huh.
no, like, let's make a crazy detour and try to make this super ridiculous. It just felt like so rote to me. Just like, okay, let's make a standard sequel that gives you exactly what you'd expect.
It becomes a weird thing where whatever this sequel is that's in question suddenly has a grocery list of things it has to do as a movie,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's its own movie, it's its own story now, for the most part, like quite often, unless it is actually borrowing characters or bringing characters forward. In this
Yeah,
situation, it is just the concept that birds kill you and attack you and stuff and will
that's it.
harass your
Yeah.
family at some point. Everything
Yeah.
else is totally original and this own person's vision for a movie, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
is his excuse. It's his chance to make a movie. Probably wouldn't be able to make the movie otherwise. Sometimes you wonder about that with sequels too, if they are,
Right.
which I don't want to totally lose Hitchcock or The Birds, but my one for that is always Halloween 2, the
Okay.
Rob Zombie remake.
Oh, yeah.
Which that one, I mean, it's much maligned by certain people for being just so different and so just like, that is not Michael Myers. But that's part of why I
No.
kind of like that movie, because it is so crass. And I think it winds up being like, why? It is kind of, Rob Zombie couldn't just make the movie he wanted, I guess. He just needed to get the budget. So it's like, this is his excuse to make a movie, and now he has to, well, we'll make it a Michael Myers movie and then we can make it.
Yeah.
But after that, he does whatever the fuck he wants to do.
Yeah.
Which I think is it's a cool sort of fuck you, like stealing the car kind of move.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it's maybe a masterpiece. I was totally blown away by it. And
I love it. Yeah, it's whack.
Yeah, from what
it's
I've heard,
crazy.
I wouldn't say it's whack. I'd say it's
I mean,
pretty well
I mean that in a
done,
good
but-
way.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I mean that in a good way. But it is in the context of the conversation. Like it is one of those where it's like, what is going on here? As
Well,
far as my
that's-
expectations are concerned.
I would say that's an outlier, though, in terms of the whole conversation about sequels, because from what I understand, I think you just touched on this, is that his first remake, he wasn't able to do everything he wanted to do. And so Halloween 2 was his final chance to like have a fucking primal scream of slasher tropes and just excess,
Mhm.
and yeah, so to me, it's that rare instance where it's like every other time we encounter a sequel, the first film is usually regarded as like the perfect document of that idea of that the world has been created and you will not get a more pristine version of that world, that idea, that character, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And he's just like that situation is completely different. You know what I mean?
And it's extra crass because the first one, which I don't like as much,
I didn't really
but
like it, no.
I'm not as against the whole giving Michael a prologue thing. If anything, that's the most interesting part of that movie. Whether you think it totally works or not is another story, but it is someone actually going in and doing something with the character. After that,
Sure.
he does just sort of remake wholesale with more curse words the original Halloween movie. It just like feels like almost shot for shot at a certain point.
Yeah, it's kind of boring.
Which then people hated that because nobody likes that necessarily.
No,
but then
no.
people hated him going too far and doing the exact opposite, which is like making Michael Myers the Incredible Hulk, and he's anything but the shape, and the vibe is no longer at all John Carpenter.
No, it's Rob Zombie.
Which I don't know. Do you read comic books at all?
I used to. I would say when I was I feel like this sounds so condescending. Like I did when I was 14, but like I was super into like comics and got really into graphic novels. And I'd say the last comics I read, like comic series, was maybe like Preacher or something.
Well, I mean, I bring that up because it is what I started to think about. Because I think I'm more open to the average sequel than a lot of people are. If I really do like the original movie, I am interested in it branching out, even in weird shapes, ideally in weirder shapes, even if they don't work and stuff, because I read a lot of Batman, and Batman just goes through so many shapes and sizes. And at a young age, I feel like I was just trained to be like, there's no fixed author here. This is this is a character who's just always changing. He can be like super gritty Frank Miller, or he can be Adam West, like super wacky cartoon Bugs Bunny. And it's all the same character. And if anything, I know that's like an easy thing to shoot down, because then you're just like, well, it's all corporate, and it's that is there too. It's obviously it's a
Wow.
brand, so they need to perpetuate it forever, and that's what's going on there. But on the flip side, I think
Mm-hmm.
that idea of a lack of an author does give this elevated feeling to Batman, that he does actually exist outside of all, like, of an author, which is kind of wild, to think about.
Oh, I like that. That's actually really cool. It's almost like Batman is like a genre then.
He's a genre, and like I feel that way about I don't know. This is the Star Wars sequels and the Matrix
Mm,
sequels. As long as, like, paradoxically though, I am more prone to being more just because of a taste thing. I think the George Lucas stuff, or
sure,
the
yeah, yeah.
specifically the sisters' involvement in the Matrix, that being tied to them and everything. But at the same time, I feed into a lot of the extended universes of both of those,
Okay.
uh, as far as they're concerned. But I think
Mm,
they branch off into weird shapes too, and are this sort of entity for me that is bigger than the author.
yeah.
Or if anything, the author's word on them is just like, that's just what happened in Star Wars. It's a true story, and that's like, I'm not going to tell George Lucas that he did it wrong, or
Right.
something. It's
Yeah, yeah.
simply how it happened, and he's transmitting it. Same with the Matrix movies. Although, yeah, I know the Matrix movies. How do you feel about the sequels of those?
I haven't seen them. I apologize. I've only seen the
Oh, you
first
haven't
one.
seen them?
No.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, I saw the first one and I really liked it. I'm debating whether I tell this on the podcast or not. I saw the first one. I really liked it. I saw it in theaters, and I saw it again in theaters when I went to England that year. And then a few years later, when I was like, I think 15 or 16, I had a really bad experience on mushrooms, and I passed out on my friend's driveway. Like I fell straight back, like this. And when I woke up, I had like the worst trip of my life. And then my friends tried to, like, calm me down, and we ordered pizza. And then at the end of the night, we watched The Matrix, and they all fell asleep. And I remember just being like, fucking hate this movie. Like, it just something soured in me about it. It's like I what's the blue pill, the red pill? Like, I finally had the red pill about the Matrix. But
Oh yeah, you wish you could get plugged back in, never see it again.
or no, it's not even that. Just I had like a different perspective on it. Then I don't know, but I'm probably
That's
pretentious as
intense.
fuck by saying that. Yeah.
No,
I
but that's a very specific, talk about set and setting, to watch The
Right.
Matrix.
Um, I also wanted to share this anecdote about sequels that kind of had made me open to sequels, because you were saying that you're kind of like you feel like you're more open and receptive to them. So for me, as a little kid getting into horror movies, I got really into Nightmare on Elm Street, that whole series. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand as a kid renting them when I was, I think, 9 or 10 years old, that I should do it in order. So the first one I rented was five, and then I just darted around. I think I did like five, then three, then four, then one, then seven. That, like, I just kept jumping around, and it never
Oh, that's
occurred to
cool.
me. Yeah, it didn't occur to me as a kid that that no, 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 you start at the beginning and you work your way through. I didn't understand that, and I just was like, this series is great. And since then, I think that's why, like, I love the fourth one. That's my favorite one. And for a long time, well, not I shouldn't say a long time, but for a few years, uh, even the first one didn't really make a huge splash for me. Like, I liked it as a kid, but as an adult, I was like, this one's kind of boring. I love it now. I've
Right.
kind of come to terms with it, but
Well, because
you
they didn't
get
have
to
to
the
stretch it and dress it up at that point and do other things with it.
right. So essentially, we get to the fourth one, and Rennie Harlan is like my time to play dress up with my
Oh
friends,
yeah.
right? Tying it all
Oh my
back,
God.
baby. Tying it all
There it
back.
is. Oh yeah. And well,
Yeah.
yeah, the horror sequels are good to bring up for it because they're just expected. That's like a different thread of sequels, right? Where they are,
Mm,
if anything, Nightmare on Elm Street is weird in that instance because there is sort of a through line to them as far as like the narratives of Freddy goes and stuff. Sometimes I
yeah.
guess that happens in Halloween too. But I
Yeah. They
mean,
they
um,
they all have a through line. Like I can't think of a series that doesn't have some form of a narrative thread throughout all of them. Halloween's the
yeah,
only one where three they tried to do something different. I think also there's a timeline with Halloween where I think it goes like 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, but then
yes.
7, 8 connect to the first two. And there's just this whole
Man,
weird
people
chart
get confused
explaining it.
about the Star Wars and which order to watch them in. Try the Halloween
Yeah,
series.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, it's sort of a choose your own adventure thing where you can kind of say, I kind of just wanted to see what happens with Jamie Lee Curtis. So I'll go 1, 2, 7, and 8. But then how did those factor into the David Gordon Green remakes
Yeah, right.
or sequels?
I
Yeah.
don't
It's
know
it's
how they factor in. I
it's
mean, I
confusing.
guess yeah. Those the stakes are lower though for those because horror. Yeah, Friday the 13th is sort of the thing that people hold up when you're talking about throwaway sequels, right? Which is just
Mm.
keep them coming, more tits, more gore, and throw Jason in there, and doesn't matter what happens, keep them going.
Yeah.
Where the stakes are incredibly high with something like Star Wars or the Matrix was very upsetting for folks.
Yeah.
In how, but I don't know.
Well, okay.
For me,
I
for
think what
me, it
we're
winds up being like, how much do I love whatever the central thing is, and I don't
yeah.
actually get as protective about it. I don't get protective about it. I just want more of it. Like that's how I am with
Yeah.
bands and artists. Like if there's a band that I love, like the Grateful Dead or shit like that, I will listen to all of it just to see what it's like, just to see
Sure.
more of it and get more of
Yeah.
it. I will definitely always understand and isolate that there's certain moments that are obviously could have the band could have broken up and fuck the
Yeah.
rest. That's how the Matrix is always held up as. The Matrix is always seen, and the first Halloween movie, both are seen as these complete, perfect kind of scenarios that
Mm.
have a full arc, a full metaphor of in the Matrix transcendence of, from the one to like being the chosen one and everything. And you can just stop there.
Yeah.
But if I actually love what's going on, I'm down with more.
Yeah. I think though, when you're saying that there's sort of like a difference in terms of the audience for Star Wars versus, something like Friday 13th. To me,
Mm-hmm.
it's getting into almost like the idea of the film as the experience versus the idea of the film as a story. And I think that the fans that gravitate towards like science fiction or even just more like mainstream and less genre restricted films are people that need that continuous narrative that connects everything and feels almost like you're watching episodes of an entire story arc. Whereas I think with horror, you're always going to experience something. You're always trying to get that experience. Those like, I want to feel the sensations of this. I want to experience the visceral shocks of this. And so to you, it's really just a matter of like, does this film deliver that? I don't really care how I get that. I just want that meal served to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I feel like I come up against that a lot. Sometimes Mark and I on the podcast, we like bump heads on that. Like
Sure, sure.
he can pull it apart and dissect it and tell me
Yeah.
why it's obviously like what I just ate is not mashed potatoes, like it's gravel or something.
Sure.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I will keep eating the gravel because it's giving me that feeling that it's
Right.
mashed potatoes. I don't give a shit how it's doing that. If anything, that makes it even more miraculous. I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, how the fuck is this kind of cartoonish, silly thing bringing me this joy or this throwaway, this thing that should be throwaway, like Batman? How is it elevating to this level of feeling like it's this
Right.
wider, greater feeling for me? And I don't know, I don't need to really flesh it out too much, even though I still do that. I love talking about those
Hmm.
things and trying to get to the bottom of them. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like ideally you get the feeling or you don't. You know, it's like being in love.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think when a film, or at least an original film, the first film of a series, is like the genre being created, then you kind of need it to go into more of like prioritizing the experience and prioritizing the sensations of that experience, you know. I feel like I'm just kind of reiterating what I just said before, but i
No,
think then I think then if you're picking apart the story elements of it, it really just says that you didn't get that experience out of it. And I don't know, I really think some people are just more inclined to gravitate towards narrative over presentation. And I feel like presentation is not really the best word to use. It's a little too reductive. But can I go on like a little baby tangent and then I'll swear I'll wrap it up? But I was thinking about this the other
oh
day
yeah,
that, yeah, hopefully you'll dig this. Hopefully you'll dig this.
split my head.
Okay, because I think about this a lot in terms of like how for me I'm always more drawn to like how the film was presented, the performances, the score, the cinematography, the pacing, the editing. Like for some reason, all that sometimes means more to me than what actually happens, and it kind of makes me think about when you have a dream and you try to explain the plot of the dream to someone, and they're just like, oh, that sounds kind of funny. And you're like, what are you talking about? It was a nightmare. And it's because those elements that create the dream and create the memorability of the dream, the impact of the dream, are essentially they sort of like correlate with what I'm talking about in terms of like the score, the cinematography, the performances. Like those are all elements that like we can't really quantize as much as we want, or qualify as much as we want. You know what I mean? Like there's always something very artistically driven about them. But those are the elements to me that give this singularity and the most impactful um, element of the dream and of the film. You know? Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And I think it does. I don't know. The dreamlike quality comes out in movies that have sequel, like the sequels of movies, for sure,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
because they are like what you're saying. They're sort of, it's hard to identify what it is that makes it Psycho, right? And then all of a sudden there's
Mm.
Psycho 2, or there's Vertigo, and then you blow it up in this sort of silly way that I did, with like almost building it back up with collages of like the main elements to make Vertigo 2, uh, that I did, which is just like it makes a dreamlike quality, almost like you're having, which I've had dreams about movies, and they usually are like sequels. They're like, okay, yeah,
Mm.
it was Vertigo, but everything was, it was just certain things from Vertigo were there, and they're rearranged and stuff. And maybe that's a simplified way of like talking about the narrative going onward from like chapter 1 to chapter 2, but it is this weird displaced, like it feels weird to find yourself in those places, and that's what I found fun about making Vertigo 2, which was this. And my movie ventures into like Jimmy Stewart is the main character. It's not just Vertigo, it's also everything that's sort of around Vertigo. It's like the aesthetic of Vertigo. So like the color green, it's down to the color green and purple, and these in particular just feelings around it that don't have much to do with just what happened and all the crisscrossing plot lines and the characters and stuff. Because for me, you can talk to your blue in the face about the original Vertigo and how intricate the plot is and whatnot, and what went into the cinematography and stuff. For me, it's closer to like a weird dream or a smell that makes Vertigo or something like Star Wars like actually mean a lot to me, right?
Yeah.
And it's this thing that you can't really just go forth and create or recreate in the context of a sequel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which adds to the uncanniness of sequels, I think.
Mm. I think for me, my favorite thing about Vertigo is the Bernard Herrmann score. That really kind of makes the film what it is.
Which is such a simple thing to say, like I like the music, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
for certain movies though, it's just so huge. And
Yeah.
that was such a big part of my editing, which almost got it taken off YouTube. I just wound up sending them a bullshit message on YouTube saying that it was an essay for
Right, yeah, yeah.
educational purposes, and they wound up
Yeah.
keeping it. So that's a pro tip. So I still edited a whole movie to the Bernard Herrmann score that, and it's still up there. So
I
I'm gonna
love
be
that,
okay.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I would say your film does lock into these sort of these points that are very dreamlike. I think I wrote in my review of like the plates spinning, like I think you kind of lock into these zones, and I think it's the rhythm that I think comes out of you being a musician, and also you kind of like playing with the source material. And I'm wondering, like, did you kind of storyboard it? Did you have like a script? Or was it sort of just you assembled all these pieces and then you kind of constructed it more out of that like dream logic feel?
I had a script, but it was definitely, yeah, it was all written out, all the dialogue, because I knew I was dealing with non-actors, which were all the people I was living with having this Hitchcock marathon. It's all these PhD students that I was living with that I just cast in the movie, just because again
Mm.
I wanted it to be, this is a thing we can do together. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that Jacob really doesn't sound anything like Jimmy Stewart. He's going to play Jimmy
Yeah.
Stewart, which is oftentimes a fun thing for me. Again, like an added aspect of the dress up or something. Let's have a
Right.
guy play a girl, or have a young person play an old person, and just
Oh
say that you
yeah,
can just,
yeah.
that's like movie magic to me. It's just, if you say
Yeah.
it's Jimmy Stewart suddenly. I don't even have
Right.
to do some kind of garish Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One thing to make it Jimmy Stewart, right? Um, I
Right.
I can
Yeah.
just say it, and I know that also is inherently a joke too. It's like that's, but
Sure.
I like that push and pull of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was all written out, and the accidental qualities of it though do come in later, because the whole thing, and I've always sort of had these like creepy uh I don't know, synchronicities with my movies and art and stuff, and I'm sure most artists can feel that in their work. But what wound up happening was I'm really lazy with getting tech. I'm not very interested in tech, so I've had the same DV camera, like digital camera, that I shoot on these little mini DV tapes, like actual tape. I've had it since I was in high school, and it was kind of old then, so I've just been shooting on it ever since then for years and years and years. And I filmed on the same tapes on these, um, which is wound up degrading the tapes unknowingly, to the point where if you watch the movie, there's all these psychedelic flourishes where you're getting, all of a sudden there's these pixelated sort of storms of pixels coming in, and there's like a guy's head will just like arrive in the middle of a tree or something, um, and then
Yeah.
disappear. And it looks like I'm doing it on purpose, like it's this psychedelic trick that I learned in After Effects or something,
Mm.
but it's not. it's the tapes just breaking, and I digitized them, and that's just how they are. Those are just real
Yeah.
artifacts. Which, yeah,
But
Vertigo
it's
is about
it
memory and degrading memory,
yeah,
right? Um, which that was
true.
pointed out to me by friends that watched it, was this sort of like Jimmy is trying to go back, right? In Vertigo, he's trying to go back to his old flame that he was in love with, that was never real to begin with, right? That's the whole tragedy of it. But he's trying to
Okay.
make her like, let's fix your hair like this, and we gotta, and it just keeps degrading the experience to the point of him becoming a monster
Oh,
and her
yeah.
ultimately dying, which the tapes themselves I'm filming it on are degrading.
Yeah.
And also inside of that, there's this narrative that is real in it, that I was filming this with a partner that I was living with, and it became pretty apparent early on into the filming that I was going to be moving away and we were going to be breaking up,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which is an interesting, it's like not a
Mhm.
planned thing, obviously, but
Yeah.
adds to some of the intensity of it all for me. And definitely because this thing was going to be sort of like, ideally it starts as a lark, and then it is this like, oh wow, this is like the last thing I'm going to make with these people, and it's the last thing I might make with this partner. I'm filming this partner that I was with and casting her as sort of the love interest in the movie, and Jimmy and her break up in the end. And those are also wind up being the tapes that are degraded the most. Like once you get to the point where they're breaking up,
Wow.
it was like the audio cuts out. There is no audio after a while. It's the tapes are
Mm.
just so fried at the point. My digitizing them could barely get much information off of the tapes even.
Oh, wow.
um
Okay.
Again, seems intentional but not. But yeah, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
again just talking about like exploding an original and trying to assemble it from parts is this sort of thing you can't do, and that is the
Yeah.
weird sort of paradoxical thing you do with a sequel when you try and make a
Mm.
sequel. And yeah, even if you have $1 million budget.
But how does Spider-Man 3 fit into all of that? Because that was like that totally threw me off.
That's definitely just the stream of consciousness happening there.
Okay.
um Also a favorite of the group that was in the house. So again, I'm just pulling things that people would be interested in. Like I'm trying to make something that is going to get people excited to show up to the set, right? Like the set
Okay.
being our living room or the backyard. But so that's one of the things. And I don't know, I don't know, it factors in because it is a sequel, and a much hated sequel too, to a otherwise very, very successful and critically acclaimed series. The first two Spider-Mans were just so beloved. And
Yeah.
then the third one, and it is also about corruption and like Spider-Man being corrupted by this evil dark suit, and everything.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know. Yeah, that a lot of that is stream of consciousness and flowing into there, which I just do think it's like one of the funniest, wildest movies ever. Is Spider-Man 3. Uh,
Okay.
I,
I haven't
I
seen it.
see it.
I don't think I've seen it.
I see it up there with The Room, to be honest. Like as far as
Really? Okay.
just outlandishly strange experiences you can have watching something, like trying to be something and it's not doing that. It's doing something like totally alien.
It kind of makes me think of a film that was on your list that you sent me just before we did this, Troll 2.
Yeah.
You've seen that, right?
I love Troll 2, but I only saw it recently. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that film to me is like aiming to be something and then failing to be that and then being something even more incredible.
Which, wow, yeah, that would be the hope of a sequel. Like that would be the
Yeah.
accidental. Because really, you're never. That's the whole thing. You're never going to measure up. No one. It's so rare that anyone would actually say it's like it's just as good as the first one. Like that is like so.
Right.
It's either going to
Hmm.
be better somehow, like Empire Strikes Back,
Sure.
like for some people, That's like
Yeah,
held as an
yeah.
example of that. Or it's going to accidentally on your way there, you're going to find something else. Like there's just totally, which that one is
Yeah.
funny. Like Troll 2 is funny because it has, had they, isn't it the whole thing like they hadn't even seen the first one or something, or
I
they
don't
barely
think
even knew what it
so.
was?
Yeah.
Not,
I mean, it's about
it's not like
goblins,
affiliated
so
even.
that was a common thing that was going on with the Italian film industry, and I think I want to say the late 70s to maybe 90s, of basically doing these horror films that were titled unofficial sequels to like American films. There's actually a really great series of films called the La Casa films, which are technically Evil Dead 3, 4, 5, and 6 in Italy, but
Whoa.
are known to us as Ghost House, Beyond Darkness. Oh, I can't remember the other titles. But yeah, there's a bunch of them, and they're just these incredible mishmashes of like haunted house, zombie, like whatever you want thrown in there. It's like the total kitchen sink. They're hilarious. And the director of Troll 2 made one,
Oh.
Beyond Darkness. Yeah. Oh, oh my God. He did also this one called Night Killer, which is also known as Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, I believe. And that one
Oh.
is so
Also known
crazy.
as,
Yes.
in parentheses, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
I
If you want to get
actually
technical.
I spent like I think $60 to get the like limited slipcover that has the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 cover on it. It was like, we're selling these until we get a cease and desist. So I was like, I need to get that.
Oh,
Yeah,
there's something
yeah.
so funny about that too, because it's, I mean, I guess it's lucrative. In some of these cases, you wonder. Like, obviously, directing the next Star Wars movie is lucrative for your career, but
Yeah.
I don't know. In some of these cases, I don't even know. Like they like so many of them are so throwaway and are lost to time. They are just like these quick jobs you can get away with, like something like
Yeah.
Carrie 2, The Rage, or like the
Yeah.
sequel to American Psycho that nobody has seen.
Oof.
I tried to track that down for this, uh,
Yeah.
and
I've
it's
seen
just
bits of it.
impossible to find. Like Mila Kunis.
It was on TV a few times, like back in the day. So I caught little snippets of it, and it was terrible, like unwatchable.
Yeah.
Uh oh, you guys need
Oh
to do a
yeah.
bad sequel. Have you done a bad sequel episode?
I really want to do Exorcist 2 on there sometime.
Yeah, but some people claim that's a good film, and I don't know. Maybe it is.
That's that's why I think it would be good, because most of the time, ideally, there's a conversation there, where
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
not just, because that might be the problem with American Psycho too. I don't even know, as much as everything has been championed now, there are certain movies that are just sort of like probably just, and if you are liking it, it is just because it's totally bad and like kind of silly or something,
Yeah.
but maybe
Yeah.
doesn't even elevate it to a room status, right? Ideally, there is some kind of conversation going on there. Was, yeah, like The Heretic is so weird because they immediately go in and, if I'm remembering correctly, kind of just turn the whole thing on its head, where they're like, it's not really spirituality, it's science and psychic abilities. They're
Okay.
like, it's like suddenly like scanners, and she has psychic
Okay.
powers, and it's
Yeah.
like a psychic movie all of a sudden. They do eventually go to Africa, so I think they eventually land it back into some sort of conversation with spirituality. But it's just
Sure.
a
Sure.
real weird about face, like totally losing the Catholic Church aspect of the original Exorcist. Which again, you just wonder, like, and it makes it more interesting for me. It does make it
Mm.
like when these things, like we've said, they bend into weird shapes with whatever
Yeah.
material they have to use. It just is weird. Like, how did, like, just interesting to wonder, like, how did they arrive there with some of these?
Well, it makes me wonder if what makes a sequel unsuccessful or maligned is that it doesn't continue with the tone of the first film.
Yeah, but it also, which seems like a weird move, and it would
Hmm.
be. I don't know. I would be really curious to, and I should have looked up more, but I would be really curious to like interview someone who's going into um that job of
Yeah.
trying to direct like the sequel to The Exorcist or some shit like that. Where it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? I'm sure that it's like it's daunting because obviously the fans are breathing down your neck for it to be a certain way, but you
Sure.
obviously it's this always the paradoxical thing of I'm gonna really please fans and be true to the original because obviously I'm doing this because I love The Exorcist, for instance, but I also have to make it my own and have my own vision as an artist going into this. And I have to do
Yeah.
something that's never been done with The Exorcist or Indiana Jones before. Uh,
Right.
which
Right.
again is just like you'd be better off doing it without Indiana Jones being involved, right? Like if that's your
Yeah.
actual aim. So you wind up meeting in this weird middle place.
Well, you're saying middle place. I feel more like it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, and that
Definitely.
if you try to venture out on your own and have your own completely different vision of it, then people will be like, "What is this?" And then if you try to copy what was going on in the first film, people say this isn't as good as the first one. So I think you just need to accept that, and just say, well, some people are going to be pissed off, and then some people are going to be 9-year-old boys that rented before seeing the first one, and are all of a sudden discovering
Yeah.
different ideas of how films can work. That was me. I was right.
Yeah. Well, there's the little boys, and they're going to be happy either way, whatever happens with Star Wars, because they're true
Yeah.
believers. Unless Star Wars is suddenly a procedural drama where it's just lawyers having a court hearing or something out of nowhere.
But
Uh,
I feel like the way films are going, the way TV's going, is that probably would be the next Star Wars film or series. Is just like very procedural heavy, because I feel like people are getting more um just more accustomed to just give me more dialogue, give me more narrative. I don't care about spectacle anymore because everything is dialed in with CGI, and no one knows how to make a great like chase scene anymore. Bit of a rant,
no, but I mean
but
that's kind of points to my problem with TV versus movies. Um, and why I maybe respond to a sequel to a movie more than a next episode of a TV show
oh,
is it's this like
100%, yeah.
it's this whole dialogue driven like what's on the page stuff where it's like the
Sure.
arc of which I can appreciate that to a certain degree. Of course I can. Like the twist that so and so is your brother the whole time or something like that. But
Right.
that's so much further away from what we're talking about and what we've been talking about, which is this sort of aesthetic level
Yes.
that these things exist on, ideally are existing on, that are going to make me love whatever it is more in a more primal sort of way. Um,
Mm. I would liken it to how for me a film is very much one like concise statement. It's like the whole sentence and then the period on the end. And in a lot of ways, a film for me will feel like the tightening of this vice grip. Where you're leading up to the end of the film, and every point along the way has this like real purpose to it, whereas like a TV show is this continuously flowing world, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of
uh-huh.
great TV for sure, but at the end of the day, it's like I want to feel like I can eat the whole meal in that span of time, as opposed to just continuously eating a bag of chips.
I do too. Yeah, I prefer that. And it is in the context of sequels, it winds up being this sort of there are examples like I think Star Wars is a good continuous story. The original trilogy is a good continuous story uh,
Mm-hmm.
in movies because it was kind of plotted out, and and planned and stuff like that. Where
Yeah.
in other situations, it's weird for people to expect that from movies that clearly are not planned to have like this whole Friday the 13th does not have a 9 movie arc planned at
Right.
Friday the 13th 1, right? It does
No,
not.
no.
Um,
But
it might have like the vaguest idea of something like that, but like for volume 2, but outside of that, no. So the next one is going to, if you've seen more than one movie in your life, you're probably going to understand that next one is kind of going to be maybe a different director, maybe a different spin. It's going to be
yeah.
rearranged in this weird sort of way where it's the thing you knew and now it's not the thing you knew, which I kind of like that.
Sure, sure. You're making me think of a very weird example though of a sequel series. Have you ever seen the Saw movies?
No.
Okay, so I think Saw, the whole Saw film series has been sort of misrepresented in a way where a lot of people just assume that they're like mindless torture porn and there's no story involved. But what you actually find if you venture into like 3, 4, 5, and 6 and onwards is that there's way too much story. Like
I've heard about this.
yeah, every new sequel starts to ram in even more flashbacks to flesh out the backstory and trying to create this even more like convoluted sort of setup behind it all where you're just like, can we just make it about the traps? Like, what the hell?
Right. You're back to the beginning where you were like, oh no, actually it is just noise. Can it just be noise again?
Yeah, just give me the noise. That's all I want. But it's interesting because I think what at least makes it kind of fascinating to me is the fact that like because of how extreme those films can get, the public has kind of written them off as like just mindless torture porn when that's like completely not the case at all. Like my sister, ever since she had her son, told me that she cannot watch horror films at all. Like they totally freak her out too much. But the Saw films she likes because they are so story based, which is not something you'd expect.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Right.
Do you think that and you have to wonder, and I don't know, I would believe it, that the writers and the people that were behind it all read the reviews, right? And heard that is what all anyone talks about when they talk about Saw, or at least when it came out originally, was always just like, oh yeah, but it's just noise, it's just stupid torture porn, doesn't have a story. So they're like actually being good little attentive film students and like, oh well, I'm gonna take that critique and okay, I'm gonna need more story in it, and then they just keep on adding more story in it, which is such a weird, like interesting audience and artist participation going on with that. Just so weird. Which they still wind up not liking it though, which is always the weird part. It's just you don't know what an audience is actually going to like or what they even really liked about the original thing in the first place. I mean, you just don't know.
I think with the instance of the Saw directors, they really wanted to continue the series and continue making money. But have you come across any sequels where it seems like maybe the director, despite making a decent film, does really want to like end the sequels after part 2 or part 3 or whatever? Like they just are like, okay, but I need to destroy this through line. Like we really can't continue this anymore.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I have any instances where I know for a fact with like what the author was thinking as far as this being the last one. But there's definitely instances where you can tell like that was a complete thought. And they probably got pushed into more, which I can definitely see that with certain movies. Like, I mean, it is wild that there is an American Psycho 2, because that one is, who would ever believe that there could be a sequel to that? It is so, the whole point is he's just marooned on his island at the end, and no one ever imagined more after that. They're so complete.
Right. Yeah.
Which I do think that's what shook people up about The Matrix. And I've heard conflicting things about there either being a plan for more Matrix movies or not, from the sisters. And that is always the argument that people usually use. They did not need more, even though I'm sure that at the time they were like, fuck yeah, I want more Matrix movies. Give me another Matrix movie. And then they were really pissed when they got another Matrix movie.
Right.
My argument for Matrix Reloaded is that it winds up being in a dialogue with what I think, like we said, is The Empire Strikes Back, is the quintessential, held as the holy grail of sequels, right? And I think they both do similar things. I don't really need to get into which one I prefer. I don't really care about that. I definitely love Empire Strikes Back on a grading scale or something, but that's not important here. They're both addressing an original movie that was so huge and so complete, because they blow up the Death Star at the end of The New Hope. And at the end of The Matrix, like, he is God and he's flying, and the main guy is dead. There's things to be done, I guess, in both of those movies. But you're like, he's got it. We're good. Rage Against the Machine is playing. And then the next one starts, and they're like, in Star Wars, they're huddled on a snow planet hiding. You're like, what happened? Like, I thought we were on top. I thought we were good here. And all of a sudden, my heroes are hiding in a hole somewhere. And in The Matrix, Neo goes forth, and it's like, actually, and it's the most hated part of the movie, but I think it is what makes it interesting, is the architect portion, where the architect turns to Neo and he's like, you know what? That whole thing in the last movie about how you're the one and you're special, not true at all. There have been hundreds of you. I'm kind of spoiling this for you, Bob, but
I know.
If you haven't seen it by now, I mean,
I know, right?
I don't know if you're going to watch those, but I would encourage you to.
Okay.
But that's sort of the twist. In both of those, it is this sort of like, we all have those. I'm kind of going on a thing about it, but it is close to my heart. In that we've all had those moments, of those like mountaintop moments, like fucking on top of everything, and we go to bed and then we wake up and like, what happened? Like, I thought I had it all solved. I thought I was enlightened. I took acid yesterday and I was on top of the world, and I understood everything, and I could do geometry backwards. And now here I am back on Earth again, which I think I like that lesson of that it just never ends. And if anything, sequels teach you that, it just never fucking ends. You're not done.
So maybe then, when I was recovering from my bad shroom trip, watching the first Matrix, I understood then and there that there would be sequels.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You see, you were prophetic.
It.
You were the oracle in that situation. You were like, "Oh, Neo, you don't even know the half of it yet. You have so much more to do, and it's going to get so dark, and it's not going to end well for you."
By me asking you, though, if you could think of any examples where they tried to stop a sequel, is actually my way of bringing up Gremlins 2, because that is like famously the sequel where Joe Dante, I think he was forced to make it or something along those lines. Gremlins 1 being such a huge success, the studios, were like, you have to give us a sequel. And so he was like, can I do whatever I want? And then he basically, I would say it's like a satire of the first one. Like, it's just like complete Looney Tunes. And there's even a part where Phoebe Cates' character says, I think she regurgitates a monologue she says in the first film that's supposed to be really sad, but she says it again in the second one and does it in the exact same tone, but it's meant to be like funny. It's really weird.
I'm curious about that one so much, and I really wanted to watch it before this, but do you get the idea or the feeling, because I think that definitely happens in sequels, where someone doesn't even want to be, like we were kind of touching on it, like where someone doesn't want to be making these even. They just want a job and they want to make
Oh.
movies and they want to do what they have a vision. Do you feel like that happened with Gremlins 2? Like he's like, fuck, I can only make the movie if it's Gremlins, and I hate Gremlins. Do you think he hates Gremlins?
No, I think it's more just like I think he's just like a curmudgeon guy. And I think that Joe Dante was just like, well, then can I just be like, the, what's the term? Enfant terrible. Like, just like, can I just
Oh
run
yeah.
amok and do whatever the fuck I want? Can you give me the keys to the kingdom and I can just spray paint El Barto all over the walls? Like, it's just so bratty and I don't want to say punk rock in a way, because he seems to be like before, coming from before those sensibilities. But yeah, I don't know, it's an interesting one. But when you say sequels that someone made that didn't want to make them, wasn't Birds 2 directed by Alan Smithee?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think that's not a real name.
Well, okay.
Am I
What do
am I
you know?
wrong about that?
I didn't know that that's not a real name.
Yeah, I just saw directed by Alan Smithee, and I thought, wait a second, like that's one of those like pseudonyms or something, because that's, I think that, you know what I mean, those names that people fall back on. Yeah, because it says here directed by Rick
Oh, so that's one of
Rosenthal.
those. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it might have
it's
been
an
directed a little
it's
bit
an
by committee or something, or
yeah, it's an official pseudonym used by film directors who wish to disown a project, coined in 1968. Which is weird
amazing.
because they have. Oh, but you know what? If you go on Letterboxd, you can see the real director will be put next to it. So they have, for
Mm.
instance, Hellraiser 4 Bloodline is directed by Alan Smithee, Kevin Yeager. So
See,
they've
I
kind of.
was looking at this and I had like a weird freak out today almost, because my friend sent me the movie. If you scroll down a little further on Letterbox, it's a movie called Anatar, which, first of all,
Oh,
the poster
okay.
is worth $1 million. It's like a
Dude,
ripoff movie of Avatar. And it's like duck people,
okay.
like blue duck people, but it's like Avatar or something. And it's directed it also by Alan Smithee.
Right. So
And my friend
I,
sent that to me today. And I was like, it's the director, and he directed a movie about weird duck people avatars,
yeah,
but I just watched Birds 2 yesterday and it's directed by him too. And it was just like,
that is so insane that you just said that, because I opened up to see what else Alan Smithee did, and I immediately looked at Anatar and went, okay. Once Seth is finished saying this thing, I'm gonna show the poster to be like, "Yo, look at this," and then you're like, "My friend said," I'm like, "Wait, is he gonna say Anatar?" Like,
but now I
oh
don't
my
know.
god,
Like,
what do
is
you
it
mean you don't know?
actually
Look at
it, is it the same guy? Or
no, 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 no.
are these
This
all
is
just projects that were disowned and fall into this strange category?
So this is in fact directed by Lorenzo Zanoni, who also directed. It looks like he's directed like some extreme horror, actually, which is really interesting.
Oh, so
Like
it's not
segment.
the Birds, not actually the Birds 2 guy. Okay, I'm
No,
following
no, no,
now.
no. Yeah, so Alan Smithee is a pseudonym, but what
This
the
is so
letter
weird.
yeah, what Letterbox did was they organized it so that you can see all the films directed by Alan Smithee as all lumped together, but when you click on each one, you can see who the actual director is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They're always and I was always like, why does he always need a friend? Why does he always need an extra director on his movies? Because he's so bad at it. And I was just like, every single one of these, he needs a friend. Like Hellraiser Bloodline and Maniac Cop 3 and like all these horrible
Anatar.
Anatar.
Oh my god.
Specifically,
Oh my
bad
god.
sequels are all over this list, which is funny to just kind
That's
of
so funny.
arrive at this now. this invisible not person who's making these movies that barely exist.
So here's what I'm thinking. Your next film, because we should talk about your next film, should have Alan
Okay.
Smithee have Alan Smithee in it.
Whoa, yeah.
Do
It's gonna be the
it.
Alan Smithee story. It's him
Yes.
directing like Maniac Cop 3 and how like it was different when I was directing Hellraiser Bloodline, you know? It
Well,
was this
no, no,
this
no,
city's
no.
not the same.
Think about it like this. Alan Smithee is a placeholder. It's a pseudonym, right? So you
Yeah.
should embrace the idea of the Alan Smithee biopic as someone who does not want to live their own actual life. So they've tried to
Ooh.
create like fictional life instead, which is the Alan Smithee life.
Like even in their own personal life, not just their work. Oh my
Yeah, or
god.
they're just like, I don't want to be attached to the things I've done, so I'll just say Alan Smithee did it. You know,
It's like the
like
talented Mr. Smithy. The talented Mr. Smithy.
Sure, yeah. Something like that. Do you have something lined up for your next film?
I've really, and it sounds like a joke again, and maybe it is just perpetuating the joke, but I've been thinking about like doing some sequels and keeping it going.
Oh, okay.
Like maybe doing a Truman Show too. I've thought about that.
Okay.
Just because you can play with a lot of weird camera angles and stuff, because it's all just whatever the camera is.
Yeah.
I would make it so it's a camera that's just fixed to a wall somehow. I don't know.
Okay. That's a
And
cool
also, what
idea.
would happen with Truman anyway? Like now, I just figure maybe he doesn't like the real world and he comes back to be on the TV. But now it's not as good now that he knows the jig is up. So now we know he's performing it. It becomes super boring. And if anything, they're trying to get him like they're trying to figure out a new gimmick or something.
Yeah.
He's trying to compete with other weird future sci-fi television gimmicks that would whatever would compete with Truman Show 2 for extreme reality, I guess. But that's just something I've had in mind. I also have some other things that I've been thinking about. Mostly I've been doing
Yeah.
comics. I do a lot of comics
Oh,
stuff.
cool. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
You're like multi-talented.
Yeah. I don't know. There's so much to do. There's a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And doodling's one of them. Doodling's great. Yeah, I have that going on. Trying to pitch this book around.
Oh
that I
man,
just
you're
finished.
writing a book?
No, that's one of the comic books. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. I see.
It's like a compilation of shorts of these like. One of them sort of erotic. They're like erotic stories, like weird erotic stories.
Ooh la la.
That ideally are kind of sweet at a certain point. I don't know. I kind of have that going on in them. Then the other one's this weird like fairy tale of sorts. The other story I'm working on. But yeah, I don't know. I'd like to get out there. I think I can't use this camera anymore though. Like I at least need to get some new DV tapes. But part of me is curious about what would happen if I just kept filming on them. Like I don't know how like maybe it would just get even more like fucked up and pixelated on them. But I always have planned for the last like 6 years to finally get a camera that I don't have to do these mini DV tapes on.
Yeah. You could maybe even rent one for cheap that's like a little bit better quality, but I just wouldn't want you to run into the issue of as you said, like the last scene of Vertigo 2, you said the sound cut out. So I could see like you may be running into limitations like that.
Yeah, it was like a cool, weird accident here where, yeah, some of it actually works really awesome. Like somebody says something ominous and then the like film breaks up and goes into weird colors and stuff. But
right.
After a while, yeah, I think with the next one, I'd be like, if I'm planning this now and knowing it might just get fucked up, I think I'm probably just going to buy a new camera of some sort. Maybe even downgrade. I should go backwards, really.
A friend of mine who's a filmmaker, Anthony Leroy, he bought I think it was some sort of like camcorder from the 80s. he somehow
I love
tracked
that.
one down. Oh man, it looks amazing. Like the old school like shot on video horror films, like it looks like that. And so if you could get something like that, that'd be awesome. But maybe that would be expensive or hard to track down.
No, I would love to experiment with stuff like that because I'm not really interested in making things look good, quote unquote. I like
Yeah.
them having that camcorder, like homemade quality. Again, reiterating that whole humanness and everything.
Right,
But yeah,
right,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't have any big plans for making movies coming up. And it's mostly just I'm trying to promote this a little bit. I'm showing it at like a local theater. I'd like to maybe take it
Sweet.
around a little bit, just to like backyard shows
Hmm.
and stuff like that would be cool to do. Who knows?
Yeah. Submit it to some festivals. There's a lot of really cool ones. There's a bunch in Toronto that I'll send you links for that do like, like found footage festivals and short film festivals where they do them in like kind of like video stores and stuff like that. So I feel like it would be like a good vibe for you.
I might look into that. I mean,
Yeah.
and speaking of Toronto and Canada, we were planning
Mm.
on talking about a Guy Madden movie in this, and it got lost
Oh
in the
yeah.
in the in the
Yeah.
storm of it all. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Like we were going to talk about Green Fog, which is a Guy Madden movie that
Right.
is one of the yeah, because people talk about. I mean, Scorsese talks at length a lot about sort of his obsession, and that there's a lot of obsession about Vertigo, and I think Guy Madden
Yeah.
has that a little bit, and he retells Vertigo basically by using it's like plunderphonics, if you know what that is or whatever, like in music
Yeah.
or like resampling. He takes other movies and builds Vertigo with it, so it'll be like a scene where it's kind of the similar thing, but it's a different movie in like a Rock Hudson movie or something from the
Right.
50s,
Right.
um, where someone jumps into the bay, which would mimic like her jumping into the water at the Golden Gate Bridge, the famous scene or whatever. But
Mm.
that was, yeah.
I don't know if you saw my review of it. I enjoyed it. I just felt like I would have needed to watch the Vertigo closer to when I saw it just to really like get the whole um sort of like, I don't want to say narrative to, I guess structure to it. The music was phenomenal. The Kronos Quartet score was just
I
like,
was wondering
oof.
who did it. Yeah, I missed that it was Kronos Quartet because yeah, it does get close to the Bernard stuff.
Very close, yeah. It seemed kind of funny to me. I don't think I'd ever seen a film like this that feels like something that should be made by someone with a lot less resources and notoriety. Because what I was reading was like he was commissioned or something to do this project, and I was like, this is the kind of thing that I'd expect to see someone who is more of like an underground filmmaker tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like something he would be all that interested in, kind of.
Yeah, because it's like
Although he's
100%
really
collage.
obsessed with memory and sort of that animating dead material thing.
Ah, okay.
Um, but
It was
yeah,
my first Guy Madden film, so I'll have to
this is
see
a
some
really
more.
weird first Guy Madden film.
I know, yeah.
I mean, maybe not weird enough but yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like such an outlier in his filmography. But yeah, I would be curious if someone hadn't seen Vertigo. That would be like the most, because yeah, I wasn't bowled over by this movie. If anything, I chose it because I thought it would have. I didn't read enough about it. I thought it would have more of like. I thought it would actually take place. I thought it would have actual characters. It would take place in the Vertigo world or something.
Yeah.
Just didn't really read about it when I thought about it. I just knew it was like, if you look up films inspired by Vertigo, it's number one. But it is just telling the story of Vertigo. Be interesting if somebody hadn't seen Vertigo and watched Green Fog, what they would get out of it, you know. But watches Vertigo too after,
Yeah.
and they would be like, okay, I can piece this out. But most of it, I don't know. So much of it is knowing who Midge is and knowing who Jimmy
Right.
is in the context of like, yeah, because most of the vocals are cut out. That's the whole thing. It's like kind of a silent movie.
Oh,
Green
that's
Fog.
true.
Green Fog
Yeah.
is a silent movie,
Hmm.
except for like a few words that they let in, which wind up being really opaque. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. They don't really help.
like the last scene is just someone saying, "You're a good listener," and it almost made me feel like what was I don't know what that was supposed to mean in the context of Vertigo, really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Maybe a
it made me
joke.
feel like they were happy that I sat through the whole movie or something, and I was already kind of like, well, you know
Oh.
what? I was a little lukewarm about this, and now you're like rubbing it in.
But what did you think of the NSYNC moment?
That was cool. I love thinking about Guy
Yeah.
Madden editing that. I thought that was funny.
Uh yeah, that was one point that kind of took me out a little. Cuz I think
It's
I
one too
think
far for sure. I think I just wanted it. I don't know. But in the context of the movie, it's one too far. I think I agree.
with an experiment like this, I really enjoy the concept of it, but at the same time, I kind of wish she just took it one step further and said, "You know what? Let's not worry about trying to reconstruct Vertigo and let's now take this material and this music and this editing style and everything and just try to make something that feels a little bit more of its own and a little more catering to the sensation that you're getting from watching it." Because it could have been like a full on
Ooh,
like Kenneth Anger kind of level experience in a way. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Kenneth Anger at all. I feel like I must have
yeah,
mentioned him to you. Yeah,
a
because his
big
films are
influence.
yeah his films are so hypnotic and they feel really like this is exactly what needed to happen with this material and this music. Like so perfectly edited and entrancing. And I kind of wish that the Green Fog maybe took a step further in that direction.
Again, it's interesting to listen to you say that, and it feels like you could, as much as you could omit Green Fog, it being this really obscure movie, and insert like Attack of the Clones or something or whatever sequel you wanted to put in, and
Oh, okay.
it would be a very valid, very a well trodden argument about a
Oh,
sequel, right? Um, which we've been sort of discussing like a lot of that, which is this sort of I wish he would have. I like one person is happy with it, sort of following a similar through line, and the other
right.
person is like, I wish they would have done something else and further and like, yeah, more experimental or done something more different and expounded from Vertigo, escaped from the original or whatever. Which I think is just it's just interesting. I don't know why this.
No,
Um,
you're absolutely right. Yeah. I didn't even consider that, but it's true. It's basically we're back to square one, It's anytime that you have a sequel or a remake or something, you're back to going, is this going to follow the recipe? Is it going to take a detour from the recipe? Why do both those things make me go, I don't know. I'm not sure. Hmm.
It's such a funny, addicting game, and it makes sense
Yeah.
why, even when sequels are this gamble, it's like this dubious thing. It, it's a reliable business venture quite often, or a reliable thing to to go
Right.
forth and do, or to even if you are just an outsider artist like me, to take a big swing and reach up for something, because people will have to have some sort of reaction, right?
Yeah.
It will,
Yeah.
one way or the other, rather than it being like just an original story of some sort, right? Which is always
Well,
the thing about these sequels.
you've removed the need to set up the world, and I think that is actually a lot more difficult than people realize. It's why we get so many superhero movies and we get so many TV shows and spin-offs and everything. It's just that people are comfortable with the concept and probably would rather just pick apart the different iterations as opposed to consuming something completely original.
Yeah, which I fall somewhere in the middle, where I wish my problem with the Marvel movies, which we would be remiss if we left the conversation without addressing that, because those are
Sure,
examples
yeah.
of ones that I kind of hate. I don't respond to those really, and I think because
Yeah.
of this, it's following the through line too much. Like, even though they have these
Yeah.
flailings of like, this one's more of a comedy, this one's more of an adventure, this one's more horror or something, and they don't have like. I'm more interested in someone taking it and like let's have a David Fincher Batman or something.
Sure.
Like I like the what do you call them, Sam Raimi Spider-Mans, because they
Sure.
feel like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man, which I think this is a common critique of the Marvel and the Star Wars Disney movies too, which is this sort of committee feeling, this algorithmic feeling, rather than it being, even if they fall on their face, it's still like, whoa, weird. Why would you make this character do that? Like, that everyone, like, why would you kill off this character that everybody loves, or this weird choice, or have this weird aesthetic that
Yeah.
only a specific person, a specific director would have? And I think those are the
Right.
sequels that are interesting. Whether they're good movies or not is another story. It's just more daring, more interesting, because we have an actual person at the helm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe though the act of criticizing is what makes people feel like they're fully engaging with whatever the art is. And
They
so I
got you either
think
way.
right, cuz like if you see a film that's like a complete standalone piece, completely original, or as original as one film can be, you're just immediately going to compare it to the closest thing you can think of, and I think some people don't like that. They don't like to see something that they can't really connect to something else because they don't know how to engage with it. Because it doesn't allow them to fully criticize it. Um, yeah, whereas like for me, it's exhilarating. I love seeing a film where I've never seen anything like this before. This is completely new to me.
Yeah, in the context of sequels, it does sort of have this. I think certain ones take time. Like, the weird ones probably take time because it's this game of expectation.
Right.
Um, which, I mean, movies in general have that. You see a trailer and you have this idea, and the movie is almost a sequel to the trailer, right? Which Longlegs came
Yeah,
out
that's
recently.
true. I haven't seen it yet, so don't spoil it.
Which I haven't seen it either, but that
Okay.
sounds like a really interesting instance of this, where it is this sort of like expectation game, where I wonder if people are even seeing the movie itself, like, rather than like, and maybe like 5 years or 10 years from now, Longlegs will be finally seen for what it is. I don't fucking know. Maybe I'm wrong about Longlegs, but
Right.
I'm using it as an
Yeah.
example that, like, people saw that trailer and it sounds like they really thought it was going to be something that it did not wind up becoming. And if
Right.
anything, that was the disparagement and confusion of that was the real problem, which I think it's the
Hmm.
same thing with the Star Wars prequels. It's just like all this baggage, all this ideas of what the audience thinks it should be rather than what it actually is. Which I think after a while, it just takes you a while to figure out that, like, Phantom Menace is just a weird ensemble movie set in space, like, and it doesn't make sense that it would be all that palatable to a large audience, but it's palatable to, I don't
Yeah.
know, me at least on this certain level, But yeah.
I think we should make this our closing thoughts then, because we've made it to
Sure.
Phantom Menace, and I'm just going to say justice for Jar Jar Binks.
For sure.
I
Well,
think he's one of the funniest characters ever created, and
I love that you. I
and the
love that
fact
you
that
said this on this
everyone,
podcast.
the fact that everyone hates him so much just makes him that much funnier to me. Like
It really does.
anytime I see a meme of Jar Jar Binks, I'm just dying. I'm like, yes,
Look at that guy. Everybody's so pissed. It's the ultimate fool. But to that, yeah.
Sorry, but yeah, no.
He's handing your ass to you. That's the whole thing. He's handing your ass to you. Of those nerds did not want to be reminded that part of these movies is for 10-year-old boys. And 10-year-old boys loved the shit out of Phantom Menace, and they loved it partially because of Jar Jar Binks. Like,
is that what it is? Because I don't even remember 10-year-olds enjoying Jar Jar. I don't remember anyone liking Jar Jar Binks except
see,
for
I
me
was
and like
like,
one friend.
I was 9 or something. I don't know. When I
Okay.
saw Phantom Menace, I loved Jar Jar. I was like, well,
Oh,
he's
okay.
the funny guy in a movie. And also, you like when you're a kid, like that's about as deep as it goes. He's got a funny voice and he looks like a frog. Like I love that. Love him. Awesome. Great. But in the context of like all these nerds nostalgia totem, like it's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, he can't stand up.
No, he's no like Chewbacca or anything. Maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know, but yeah.
Bob McCulley, you heard it here. The funniest character of all time, Jar Jar Binks.
Bring him back. Can you imagine a Jar Jar Binks like standalone spin-off film? I actually would watch that. Be like, hell yeah, let's go.
Give it time. They'll flail around and do anything that will work. I don't know. They're just trying things. And I think they're probably at the most interesting point in their death rattle with the Star Wars stuff where they would probably
It's the
just
death rattle.
fuck it, try it, I don't know.
Yeah. We need to try something new. But yeah, I'm going to run you through the questionnaire, which you've already answered before, but I just want to see if any answers have changed. So you may
Things
even
could have
be able to
changed.
remember. But is there anything that you wanted to close out on, touch on about Vertigo 2 before I move? It's currently available to stream on YouTube. You're going to be playing it at some screenings, you said, in Ohio, I take it?
Yeah, still in the works, but yeah, trying to do some of that and take it around a little bit. But
Okay.
I don't know. It's there. It will continue to be there until YouTube tries to take it down. And I got a lot of other movies on my channel. Again, I've been making movies for a long time. This is my first venture into big budget Hollywood sequel territory.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Uh,
Not the last.
the others were original. So I think the money is really piling in after this cash in. This is me selling out.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to continue to do it because, as you can see, I'm in the lap of luxury here.
Yeah, and if you ever get sued, just claim Alan Smithee directed it.
Yeah, that was not me.
Yeah, it wasn't me. It was Alan Smithee. Okay, let's rock this questionnaire. Okay, tea or coffee?
Tea.
Choose one film for the rest of your life.
I wonder if it's going to be the same one that I sort of like randomly pick out of the 5. My Own Private Idaho.
So you picked that one last time. Maybe pick a different one.
Oh, am I allowed to? Okay, I figure. Yeah. Oh, probably runner up would be Punch Drunk Love.
Ah, okay. If you had to be an animal, which would you choose?
Probably like a sloth.
Okay, cool. Because last time you said Loch Ness Monster.
Oh wait, that's a way better one. But now I'm mellowing out.
Sloth is good. Yeah. What happens when we die?
Well, in the context of this podcast, there is a sequel.
There's a sequel. Okay.
And we just keep going on and on and on, and they won't leave us alone.
They don't know when to die. Or wait, they did die in this. Okay. Anyway.
Dying is just the beginning
of a sequel.
of a sequel.
Okay. Last question. Song title that best describes your life.
Boy, that's a tough one. Do people pause a long time on this one?
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm in. I'm glad I'm in good company there. Mm-hmm. How about what's one that I just really like? Goldheart Mountaintop, Queen Directory. I just like the words.
Wait, who's the artist?
That's guided by voices.
Oh, okay. It's Gold Heart Mountaintop Queen
Mountaintop
Directory.
Queen Directory. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, Seth. Well, I will let you go, but thanks for coming on and talking sequels and Vertigo 2. Okay, I'll let you go, Seth. Have a good night, buddy.
Yeah, Bob. Always good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Absolutely.